I think we'll still wait a few minutes, right? It's not quite 11:15, it's 11:10 now.
Oh, we have 5 minutes. Do you have any question to ask us? Yes.
Do you have any handouts?
No, but I will, when I get internet access again, I will post the presentation on the conference website. I got an email saying you can post pictures and handouts and so on, so I will follow up on that, but I haven't done it yet.
But eventually we hope to put it on YouTube.
Maybe if the tech people come through.
Well, we have the video there. And this is actually, let me introduce him. He's a techie guy from Rajapat University. And my dean sent him particular to take this so he could put on the website of the university. And this is a lady, is my colleague. And come and make sure that I really deliver the order.
Are you in the science faculty?
I actually retiree. We will talk about ancient people. I taught math and physics and English for specific purposes and regular English for immigrants in the US when I was there. And I just now trying to move back to Thailand, but it's not successful yet. Because there are a lot of things going on. We have children there, the house still there. Couldn't sell it because it's so cheap right now. We want to make more money. But actually, I would prefer to be here. So I taught physics. And how about you?
I'm Japan-based. I'm in fact agriculture of a small national university.
So you have to teach English and science in English?
Yes, I'm not teaching science, but I'm teaching English for science.
Oh, perfect. Yes, that's what I did. Actually, when I was younger, after I graduated, majored in physics, I went to look for a job at Mahidol University, the medical school in the physics department. That's how I started teaching English. They said, oh, no budget this year, forget it. So I went downstairs to eat noodles with my friend who was my roommate in Chicago. While I was eating there, the chair lady came in and actually I got a job interview, which I didn't even know. She kept asking me, what are you doing here? So I said, okay, this. She said, oh, by the way, would you like to teach here? This is a medical school, you need the connection, this thick, the cable to get in. And I said, but my English wasn't good. I told her, I only know how to read. And she said, that's okay, we could train you in English. I have to tell you this, I couldn't tell the difference between adverb and adjective when I got the job. I would just tell the student, ly here could be before this one. I just don't know the name. And it took me a year to get my act together. Okay, oh, this is adjective. But the lady said it's easier to train a science teacher to teach English. So this I'm a living proof of my paper because English is not that hard. Once you know the rules, that's it. You just mimic it. That's very true. Tom doesn't believe so. And now, only the one that you have to know how to teach science. Of course, it's very difficult to be a writer like a Harry Potter, to make things fancy. But in science, you will find out you need to know a few things. We will prove it today. Okay.
Yeah, maybe we'll start more formally. So welcome. I'm Fred Marshall, and I'm retired from California State University, Sacramento. But I've been in and out of Thailand for a lot of the last 30 years. And last 10 years, I've been teaching at Ramkhamhaeng and Chiang Mai and Mephalung and Chiang Rai. Really enjoyed it here. We're looking to retire to Thailand eventually. Now we're kind of back and forth between the U.S. and my better half is, can you introduce yourself
Yeah,
again?
I'm not sure better half, but okay, Sirikun Marshall, and I went to Bangkok, class 13, majoring in physics. And I went to the US to get my master's degree in physics and came back and taught English for science technology. And then I went back to the US and lived there for the last 30 years. And while I was there, I had many careers. One of them was teaching physics and math to native speakers. and I didn't need a caption when I was teaching. Just joking. Okay, so now he is my brand, and I am consultant, freelance consultant for the Rajapat Mahasarkam University, and we are now on the process of presenting papers to the government how to prepare the whole country for Asian community, and we think we might get it. Okay, that's it.
A word about our title, teaching science in simpler English. It'd be nice if we could say in simple English, but you know, if you have looked at science texts and ideas, it can't be simplified too far. And so what we hope to do today is give you some ideas about the kind of language that students are facing, particularly in reading science texts, but also science lectures, and techniques that you can use to make it more accessible to them. Among them, simplification, but some other things we'll be talking about. So our starting point is simply the fact that, observably, there's an increasing interest in Thailand and elsewhere in teaching science and other subjects through the medium of English. And this has great potential benefits because students will learn the science content, they'll learn the terms and ways of talking about it that are used internationally based on English. And in theory, they're also going to learn English by absorbing content through the medium of English instruction. Great in practice. But we know a lot of Thai students have pretty limited English. And many if you simply approach the subject by trying to teach it in a language that students have limited knowledge of, that last point, they're going to learn the language, isn't going to be satisfied very far. You've got to have some basic comprehension. And if students don't understand the content of the lesson, they're not going to get either the lesson or the language. As well, science faculty are not trained English teachers. So I assume all of you are English teachers and not really at core science faculty, but you have an interest in that area. You have knowledge about language and language teaching that your science colleagues don't have, but they're the ones who are on the front line with students who are trying to absorb both the content of the science and understand the English. So we need this collaboration between English teachers and science teachers. The science faculty don't need to be experts in English, but they do need to be aware of the language issues that we're going to talk about today. And that's where you come in, helping raise their awareness of this and pointing out techniques that can be used to improve student learning. The science teacher's responsibility is primarily the content, the English only insofar as it's necessary to help students get the content. And if both of those are in place, the light bulb goes on in the student's mind, we get the desired good learning outcomes. The English teacher's responsibility is primarily raising students' English proficiency. But one thing we forget sometimes, our focus on all we know about the language and all that our experiences taught us belong in language courses. We forget that sometimes we really need to bring attention to the specific problems that students are having with their content area and specific language issues there. As well, English teachers need to be, this is the collaborative theme that's running through the conference and in our talk, they need to be resource people for science teachers and other colleagues who are teaching in English. So if you have that collaboration between English teachers and science teachers, you get what we're really all focused on, English teachers, science teachers, many teachers, better learning outcomes for the students.
Okay. Now my turn. in conclusion, what he just said.
So that you understand.
No. Sometimes he and I have different opinion in things. Okay, but what he said this time, I agree with him. But I would like to point it out that for the English teachers, I have found out from my past experience in other universities that I have been working at, the English teacher were trained to teach English. So they always pay attention. Oh, the student needs to know these 12 tenses, student need to know, they need to know all this. But what I like to point out to the teachers in this particular English for science or for specific purposes is, don't only teach what the student need, because sometimes they will overlook. For example, when I was at McFarland, the noun phrases were omitted from the first year preparation with the student. And then the tenses, only one that needed a lot, we would go in detail later. Present tense is 95, 98%. He did this, I didn't do it. I didn't know much about. Okay, so other things, so only 4 or 5 things we look at the text. So the teacher, I had a conference with the humanities department there, or liberal arts. I told them, this is what we found, you only need to do this to help them. And they have problem with this. The teacher said, I agree with you, but I don't think it's enough. I said, I don't care. You could teach something else, but you want to cover all this first. So I like to point that out. Okay. All right. So what is the real problem here? Is that you, the teacher, when you teach a student, the student don't understand in your science class? Well, you're a native speaker. You have no problem, as long as you know how to teach. I'm sorry. Okay, this is this, right? So, okay. Oops, sorry. Let's go back to you first. So, what happened now?
Up to go back. Down.
Up to go back. Okay. You, Thai teacher who are now teaching world class now in the more 8th grade to 12th grade. Okay. So what happened? The teacher do not know how to speak English. So actually, I have another website that I put it up and say that, wow, how could you improve your English by listening to like Youth Khan University, Khan Academy, or Voice of America, like yesterday. You just watch them, and so you could perfectly do English and things like that. And also, as you're going to teach any subject in science particularly, pictures worth 1,000 words. Because once you draw the picture, you don't have to say much. And the student could, in their head. That's the key I like to post. So you sometimes are part of the problem. You are not native speaker. But sometimes, even as a native speaker, you are the problem too. Because sometimes you can't translate it to Thai. Sometimes it's so hard to explain certain concepts in English to make sure that they understand. So here we are. The next one, how about the students? You have a variety of students. No, they're not the same. Some just, some, good. Some prepare well and come to class and say, I'm ready. So how you meet them? Okay, so we have to, what we do is we have a technique, we don't know English. Okay, why did I repeat itself? Okay, all right. So I would like to stress this. When he said, not know enough English, I would say most of the time is the vocabularies. The grammar, Thai people are taught everything under the sun, but actually they only need to know 5 for sure to understand scientific textbook. You could prove me wrong later. The majority you will see later, he's the guy who proved
We'll
it.
be going through that.
Okay. What can you do? Magician. Pam, pam, pam. Piang. Om piang, you understand? Om piang is the Thai way of say Baba Kalada or something. Okay. So we have come to the conclusion that you really have to use the students as your guideline as a center, but actually I cannot, I've been using student center for the wrong reason. I just found out that actually they mean something else. So, totally in linguistic terms. So I'm gonna say that you meet your students where they are, and then find out, as we did this morning, the diagnostic test. Say, okay, what else, what did they know? and then you bring them up. Ta-da! Easy, huh? Okay. What is this one? Am I supposed to talk about this? Science class, reading lecture, no. Oh, I do. This is what I would like to. How you bring up your students. When I was teaching at Macfarlane, I have one thing that I use that he will mention later is lextutor.ca from Canada. This is the guy, I'm sure a lot of you might already know about him. That is a program that you could put any text in and it would run down for you and tell you that, okay, this blue color, it would be the first 1,000 words, the most frequently used word. And then the next would be 2,000 words, and I can get word list. I always told the science teacher when I give other talk, I said, teach them how to use the program. It was so simple. I even put it online. You could look at students first, blank, and then FU. I will put it up here later. And we'll teach you how to use that and tell the teacher how to use this thing to help themselves and their students. So the next tutor, you will tell the student, okay, before you come to my class, we're going to talk about this chapter now. Chapter 1 from page 2 to 10. And you're going to patch this into Lex Tutor. Anything in blue, which is the first 1,000 words, you better look up or note it before you come to my class. The second 1,000 and the academic word list, at the beginning, I hope that you just give it to them because it's too much for them at the beginning for a Thai student. And while I'm at these topics, Thai student, on the other hand, I tested them, the first freshman coming into Macfarlane, 1,150 people. How much they know in the first 2,000 and the second 1,000. They know between 30% to 85% the maximum. If you know an average 30%, think about it. 30%, 100 words, you know 30% of it. There's no way they could understand anything in English. Okay? And as I said, I like to point it out again. Anytime you could draw a diagram, this is the simplest English you could do. It's no English at all. Okay, now it's his turn.
Okay, by the way, the question was raised earlier about handouts. We don't have a handout. I plan to post in slideshow on the conference website. I got an email about you can post pictures and other information here. So I will follow up on that, but I've had limited internet access the last couple of days. If you can't find it or otherwise that's a problem for you, my email address is in the conference booklet. All presenters have email addresses in the back of the booklet. And so you simply drop me an email and I will send you a copy of the slideshow. So don't worry that a lot of references to things like Lex Tutor and so on are oral. They'll be up on the screen, but you don't need to copy everything down because you can get it. Okay, so what we advocate is that there are two components to student success. One is they need the knowledge of relevant English, and to some degree we need to simplify the English for them. But if we do both of those, particularly the first, providing them with access to the relevant knowledge in English, we'll get that, maybe not A+ for every student, but we'll get the student succeeding in learning their content area through the medium of English and also learning more English. So what are we talking about with relevant language? Well, classically, linguists and others think of language as having two components, the grammar and the vocabulary, or the lexicon. What we're saying is you don't need to know everything in order to get through in learning subject matter in English. So that raises the question, well, what aspects of grammar and vocabulary are minimally necessary? That's a kind of foundation that a Thai high school or university student needs if they're going to succeed in learning subject matter in English. So let's take it one by one. First the grammar, then the vocabulary. there's been a lot of work in the last 20 years on what's called corpus linguistics, computer analysis of huge amounts of text to see what the characteristics are of real language. And one of the things that Doug Biver and others have found is that there's a type of text called informational text that is presenting information. This is typical of lecture style in any field, or textbook writing, or article writing in any field. And it turns out further, there are very limited grammar characteristics that are highly frequent in that text. There are other things that are there, but they're not very often, so they can be dealt with one at a time as necessary. But absolutely, you need to know present tense if you're going to read informational text, because almost all of it's written in present tense. Almost all. Not all. You need to know passive voice, and you need to be able to deal with long, complicated noun phrases. And I'll show some examples as we go through. And an aspect of the long, complicated noun phrases is what's classically called reduced relative clauses, where it's not as clear that it's really a kind of adjective clause modifying the noun because there's some grammatical reduction. The last three, the passive voice, the complicated noun phrases, and reduced relative clauses are particularly problematic for Thai students. It's our claim that these four elements are the crucial grammar elements for somebody who wants to succeed in reading or listening to informational text. I'm not saying the rest of the grammar is unnecessary in the language, but you've got to be sure your students know this stuff if they're going to succeed with informational text. So I'll look at examples of these as we go on, but right now I just want to present the categorization. So, implication. English classes need to turn increased attention to these difficult grammar characteristics, particularly the passive voice, the complex noun phrases. Examples ideally should come from the same kinds of scientific texts that students are dealing with if they're taking science through English. The focus needs to be on understanding. All too often as English teachers, we jump from teaching something about the language to demanding that students produce it. But think what students are doing in learning content through another language. They are primarily involved in first absorbing the information. Yes, eventually they have to write lab reports, test questions. It depends on the institution, how that is done. But their first and foremost need is that understanding and comprehension. Plus, one of the things we know as linguists and people studying language acquisition is that comprehension precedes production. You understand something, you understand it in multiple contexts, and it's out of that understanding that eventually the ability to produce it freely grows. So I would say don't demand or test the productive use of the grammar right away, but be sure that students understand it, recognize it when they see it. So in the science class, that was the English class, you teach the necessary grammar. In the science class, the teacher doesn't need to be a language teacher, but needs to be language aware. Help the students notice, once again, oh, here in this text, in your English class, you learned about passive voice. Take a look at this sentence. What's it mean? Notice that it's passive voice, and then get at the meaning. Again, we're saying the noticing, the understanding is first. Eventually, yes, there'll be some demand for production, but that's going to be later, that's going to be secondary, and it's going to be, in almost every case, less a part of what students need to be doing. Oh, sorry, a little too fast. So, quick overview of what I mean by relevant grammar components. Now, same quick overview, and then I'll follow with examples from both areas. Same quick overview of relevant vocabulary.
Okay, just a second, I would like to say
Yeah,
something.
let
I'm sorry.
her
One
say
second
clearly.
only. No, I don't have to say this clearly, I think it was clear enough. But I would like to mention something. I saw one of the exam paper of the teachers. Please do not add anything that is not, when we talk about the word relevant. So I figure, one of the physics teacher exam was like a turtle walking due south. Okay? The student said, what is due south? Unless you're talking about vectors, you're going to test them vector and then get in and find out. Do not add anything that just do things they don't know. Just to say about turtle, walking somewhere, or make it short and precise, because you're not testing language. You're testing if they know the physics questions. And I scratching my head because the student brought the exam to me and just said, what's this? And then all they didn't understand are the added on to make it nice and so no, do not do that, please.
We're not writing literature when we're writing
Yes.
our science texts.
Just say a turtle walk at a constant speed of so and so per meter. That would be great.
Okay, so vocabulary. What's kind of the irreducible minimum that's necessary in vocabulary to make? How many words does a student need to know? Well, you might start by thinking about frequency of words. The more frequent a word is, the better it is to know it, right? So let's say maybe we should ask that students know the 2,000 most frequent words, or more exactly, word families, a word plus its related forms that are formed with prefixes and suffixes based on the word root. If a student knows the 2,000 most frequent words of the language, and they pick up an average informational textbook, they'll know about 80% of the words they see on any page. Is that enough? I don't think so. That means 1 out of 5 words is unfamiliar. So you're going to really struggle and spend a lot of time with the dictionary if that's your level. 2,000 words, you're getting somewhere there, but you're not far enough. Let's say a decent goal might be 90% of the words on the page. With 90% of the words, you're not going to read quickly, but with the help of the dictionary, you'll be able to work through a text. And the other thing that's going to help is that in the remaining 10%, a number of them are going to be technical terms, so that as you learn the content, whatever field you're studying, those terms, while they're not high frequency overall in the language, they're going to occur over and over again studying that content, so you'll pick those up. And you would have to learn those anyway, even if you were studying the content in your native language. It's not just an aspect of learning it in English. So we would set as a goal 90%. Sorry. Well, how do we get to 90%? If you only know 10 words, you've already got about a quarter of the words on the average page. But the other words on the page contribute a lot more to the meaning. If you know 1,000 most frequent words, 3/4, 2,000, that's where I came up with the roughly 80%. Look how much it takes to get to 90%. You need to know about 6,000 word families. And understand, at 90%, it's still going to be slow, effortful reading with the use of a dictionary. If we really want students to read rapidly, as you can if you're reading a short story or a novel, for example, almost 16,000 words. That's an awful lot to accumulate. So either we've got this huge vocabulary learning effort, or we need to find some kind of shortcut. And the following idea is not original with me, but I'm picking up on things that Tom Cobb and in particular Abel Coxhead have brought up as a way of bringing about this shortcut. Abel Coxhead's a researcher in New Zealand who studied, she called the academic word list. She took sample text from 28 fields of study, and she looked for high-frequency words that weren't in the 2,000 most frequent words of the language. So these are words that are frequent in academic text, and she said they have to be found in at least half the fields I'm looking at. So they're not specific to chemistry or economics, but they are words useful across fields, words like analysis, words like factor. And she came up with a list of 570 words, the academic word list, words useful for university study. They're also going to be found in upper high school texts. And here's what it gets us. 2,000 words known give us about 80% of the words on the page. If you add the academic word list and get to about 2,500, you're up to just about the 90% level. So what Juke and I are advocating is, we'll get to that slide in just a minute. Here's a graphic representation of it. No 10 words, you know this much, the average page. No 1,000 words, you know these two together. You know 2,000 most frequent words, you know all of that. Academic words, that still leaves a residual of about 10% of words, some of which will be technical terms. So what we advocate is a threshold vocabulary for academic study. 2,000 most frequent words and the academic word list, giving a coverage of about 90% of the words on the average academic informational text. Ideally, students know these before they start content area study. We know they don't. But, go ahead.
All right, okay. I have two things to inject to this. As a Chinese, stingy Chinese, I don't want to study hard. I keep telling my student this, okay, you don't have much time now. Just study 1,000 words. Because I have found out that, the 1,000 words, so most of the time, even lecture from MIT professor, I put it up, 82% to 86% are in first 1,000 words.
It varies.
Yeah. Huh?
It varies. It
No, I
depends on
check. I have many. I have biology, I have physics, and all those. And I show. My student was like, how come nobody told me this? And at the end, someone cried. I said, how come nobody told me this? I suffered for 2 years here. And then I said, you know what, Mrs. Marshall, what you gave me today? You gave me hope. Oh, I almost cried when students. Let's say many students say more or less the same line. You gave me hope that I could learn something if I, know these words. And they went home. I don't know how much they studied it. But what I learned from Math Farnborough student, I did another short research. I test them the vocabulary against their ONET score in English. Okay, ONET score in English. I found it. I think this is going to be the proof of my life that ONET score from 5 to 95. Right, the students have 1,150 students. Freshmen just fresh from the markets, not even learn anything from the university yet. And against the 2,000 words, the correlation. Are you ready? Guess what the correlation? Can you guess? Would you like to guess?
Vocabulary knowledge and ONET score. Remember,
correlation.
ONET is wide-ranging English exam. It's not just vocabulary.
Anybody like to give a shot?
Directly proportional.
The
higher the ONET score, the more.
Right,
Yeah.
but what is the
How closely is it
What the
correlated?
correlation?
Is it pretty
995.
lower than 0.5?
0.5.
Wow, you want 99? Oh, no, you add the two together, divided by 2 would be the good. Okay, it's 0.69 for the 2,000. It's 0.67 for the academic word list. And
what that means is it tracks pretty closely that you can predict if you know a student's ONET score, they have a pretty high, if the ONET score is high, they have a pretty high vocabulary. You can predict the vocabulary knowledge from the ONET score, or vice versa, predict the ONET score from the vocabulary knowledge pretty well. They track together.
for the correlation. On the school in Thailand is supposed
It's a
to be quote unquote
standardized
standard like
exam.
basic English. We don't know how standard.
We
is that.
need to move
But
on.
yeah, okay, anyway, but that is the thing, and also Tom Cobb's the one that created the Lex tutor. I talked to him, I emailed him about this. He said, oh, this is much better than mine, you better publish this, and how do you get 1,000 students to do this? I told him to. Anyway, he's also done the same thing, but slightly different. He was talking about his correlation in terms of the more in terms of vocabularies, and reading comprehension, only reading comprehension, because on its score of all full skill is only 5.5, the correlation. So I'd like you to know, it's a proven knowledge, vocab.
Is crucial, it's highly. So, how do you learn vocabulary? Well, there are lots of tried and true methods. I happen to believe that a good starting point for unfamiliar second language vocabulary is simply learning a native language equivalent. That's the starting point. Then you do other exercises to broaden your receptive knowledge, word recognition, fit the word in the blank, match synonyms, antonyms, etc., definitions and words, all kinds of activities. You get productive knowledge. You can go to Tom Pycroft for lots of ideas on how to expand lexical knowledge, and he has a manuscript he's working on, a bunch of activities for building student vocabulary knowledge. What do you do with this? Well, the science teacher, you the English teacher, need to bring this word out. Science teachers need to take a look at the readings and lecture notes that they're going to use and analyze the vocabulary, see what kind of demands are being made on the student. And then give students lists of words beforehand that they're going to meet in these readings, and say, as she said, learn these. You're going to meet it in the lecture tomorrow. You're going to meet it in the reading tonight. So start getting a handle on these words. And then where do you get the information? Okay, this is the stuff that I was saying earlier. You'll show up, you don't need to copy everything down, but crucial information. Rob Waring has frequency lists of the 1,000 and 2,000 most frequent words in the language. You can find them on his website. The academic word list is at Victoria University in New Zealand. There's a bunch of information on how that was created and different ways of looking at the academic word list. You can also do a Google search of academic word lists, and you'll find that a number of places around the world have developed various activities and vocabulary learning activities that make use of the academic word list.
Okay. For the Thai teachers, I have gift for you. In the next 2 weeks, we're going to launch all these words online for free on Quizlet.com.
Quizlet, Quizlet. It's another website. You can Google it.
Yeah.
Quizlet, Quizlet.
Just think of this, quiz and then outlet. And
what-
instead of the go out shopping, it's
Within
going to be
Quizlet, what will they
Quizlet.
look for?
It will be called Rajapat. Rajapat, correctly spelled according to the Thai standard. And then, what called empty space? Blank. Underscore, just like
Blank.
space, and then big capital M. We are just finished, but we are checking. We're just
M.
checking the meaning, because we asked the student to help us, and we have to check the
We need
meaning.
to move on.
Okay.
Also, what you would want is they tell students to learn these words. You better take a look at a lecture or a reading, and you'd really like to have the words listed. Which are the most frequent words used in this lecture from the 1,000 most frequent words in the language, from the academic word list? What words are in the lecture or in the reading that aren't in the high frequency that students might have known and studied? Here's where you find that. Oops, sorry. Lex Tutor. And in particular, the vocab profile program. is LexTutor? It's a free website for learning about vocabulary and for analyzing the vocabulary distribution in text. And Sinnerkun has set up a YouTube video under the, so go to YouTube and then search for Students First space MFU. And she has information there on how to use LexTutor. If you're moderately computer savvy, LexTutor is pretty straightforward. And what does it show you? Well, you can use it to prepare students by giving them the appropriate words and to also to grade the difficulty level of text. And so you need to take the message out to science colleagues. There are these resources, there are grammar and vocabulary issues that your students are struggling with, and here are some ways of looking at it and learning about it. Now, we need to go to some examples. Okay, example text. What am I talking about here? This is just taken from Flat World Knowledge, which is an online textbook source. You don't need to read all of this right now. It's science text, right? It's about atoms and protons and neutrons, and it's the basic atomic model of matter. But as English teachers, now I'm going to ask you to look at it and do a little grammar with it. I'll show you the text again. Notice what verb tenses are used, if you would, please. And to make it a little easier, the verb tenses are, the verbs are in red, or at least all the verbs I've noticed.
I see 12 tenses in there. Do you see 12 tenses in there?
No.
Just
Okay, so those are the two paragraphs of my sample text. What do we got? Present tense, almost exclusively, right? Active and passive?
Yes.
They're both there. Significant amount of passive voice. So think about it. What's the classic curriculum in English classes? 12 tenses, or maybe if you're modern, the 8 most frequent tenses of English, and you keep coming at the tense structure, the verb structure of the language every year. Is that what students need a heavy dose of? Well, if they are working on informational text, a lot of that is not stuff that they're going to use regularly as they're reading that informational text, or eventually writing their own versions of information. Here's another grammar structure, complex noun phrases. These are things that are just noun groups that are more than a simple the black dog, the hungry audience. We'll get to lunch in a minute, but you know, something more than just determiner, adjective, noun. So in the following text, I've underlined what I mean by complex noun phrases. See if you can note what kinds of structures are occurring in those noun phrases, aside from the simple determiner, an adjective, and noun. And notice how much of the text is made up of complex noun phrases as well.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
I always thought that in any materials, there's no need noun phrase, verb phrase. This is the scientists look at where and look at here. Look at that, it's nothing. So you see that the modern atomic theory states that another noun phrase, see, another verb.
That's a lot of the language could be looked at that way. Yeah. There's a bit more to it.
I know, but should be stressed that, but
Notice
not
how much of the text is complex noun phrases here. Sorry. And this was the second part of that text. Okay. So quickly, because we're getting near the end, what other structures did you see in there? Aside from just the noun and an adjective before it, what else was in there?
Go back to the text.
Sure. here, noun, atoms. But the whole noun phrase, atoms of the same element with different numbers of neutrons. What do we talk about? Of the same element with different numbers of neutrons.
Prepositional phrase.
Prepositional phrases, right? A very rare form of hydrogen. Prepositional phrase of hydrogen, form very rare. Adjective, modifier,
Adjective order.
the mass number of the isotope. This is kind of an adjective, but it's more a noun modifying the other noun. So what we get in these complex noun phrases, among other things, is a lot of prepositional phrases following and modifying the noun, and modifiers before the key noun. Things like modern atomic, most naturally occurring, characteristic atomic. You know, it's just this dense, heavy cluster of words that essentially is saying theory or number, but the students can't pick it apart and see what goes. That's where you, as the English teacher, need to draw this to their attention, teach them about how to interpret it, and help the science teachers also recognize it and remind the students, okay, this looks difficult, but can we see what's the key word and what are the modifiers in here? What are the things that we're talking about with this cluster?
Can I ask a question?
Quickly.
Okay, do I need to tell the student this is adjective, you know, like the modern atomic theory?
What,
Can I say just
what
the
kind
theory?
of theory are we talking
Okay,
about?
can you
It's
just go with
atomic
the video
theory.
and then tell them
Is
how
it
we
new
do
or
that?
old? It's modern. Okay? You don't
Okay.
need to go into the grammar of it. You need to
Thank you.
focus on the meaning of it. Thank you. The vocabulary in the samples. All right. Pretty, right? This is what you get. This is what you get from the Lex Tutor program, and it's the sample text I gave you. Now, the blue, every word in blue is among the 1,000 most frequent words of the language. So they're fairly common here. This text is a little unusual. It only has one green word. Green words are in the 1,000 to 2,000 most frequent words. Usually you'll find more than that, but this happened to be unusual in that respect. All the yellow words are from the academic word list. You can see how these are a little more abstract, a little more academic, but fairly common and not specific to any one field. And then all the red words are none of the above. They're not the 2,000 most frequent words. They're not the academic word list words. Lex Tutor will give you various ways of looking at this information. You can get a straightforward percentage count of how many things occur. What I find useful is they also give you lists, so you can see, oh, in this text, here are all the words listed. You don't have to go through and see the colors. All the words listed that are in the 1,000 to 2,000. It was just the one word rare in my sample. Here are all the academic words in this sample text. Notice a couple of them, element and elements, make up a good percentage of the academic words used there. And what is really encouraging is it looked like there were a lot of red on the previous slide, right? A lot of words that weren't in my threshold vocabulary knowledge for students. Now what do you see? When you pull them out, they're all technical words, right? If you're studying about chemistry and the makeup of matter, these are the words you need to know in that field. And so it's not like they're these rare words like aardvark or other animal names that students might have learned in another context. They're things they need to know for their field.
No, and besides, you use the same word in Thai. Atom is atom.
A lot of them have been borrowed into
Isotope,
Thai.
same thing, so there's nothing new.
Okay, we talked a lot about analysis of the language, but we can do some simplification as well. We don't advocate a lot of simplification. We say, bring the students up, because they need to learn the vocabulary and learn the relevant grammar. But if we're dealing with real low-level students, we may want to simplify the language to some degree. And this is, again, going to be a collaborative effort because the science teachers need to be the ones to check that any simplification retains accuracy. But the English teacher can be the one to say, okay, you know, I could reword this way and make it a little simpler. What you can do is expand or rewrite passive voice on occasion. Maybe not every time, but take a look at this. You can also reduce the complex noun phrases. You can make some of the vocabulary more frequent. Collaboration, English and science teachers, different texts, same basic source, flat world knowledge. Sorry, you don't need to absorb the text. That's the picture that goes with it. Pulled out the passive structures. Look how many there are in this text. There's an adjective that's based on a passive voice verb. Passive can be pictured, has been polarized. Reduced relative clause like, which is altered in this way, is not polarized. But it's not all necessary for the meaning of the text. I went through and very quickly saw a few places where things could be changed. Can be pictured, is like, right? So if students are just getting a handle on passive voice, they don't have to have passive voice in every sentence here. Has been polarized? No, we polarize. Expand the reduced relative clause, like that is altered in this way. Lots of psycholinguistic evidence says that's easier to understand than the reduced relative clause is. Okay, so a limited amount of grammar simplification can be done once you're sensitive to the kinds of problems that students have. You don't need to simplify everything, but you can make it a bit easier. You can also take the vocabulary profile and see whether there are some places where you change words. Now here, remember, the red words are the off-list words, but look, most of them are technical, so I'm not going to bother changing most of those. But what I did notice was conceivable altered illustration. Those are academic word lists, meaning they're not in the 2,000 most frequent words, and depending on the level of my student, they might not know those words yet. Sorry. Oops. So, instead, I can change conceivable to possible, altered to change, illustration to picture, and now I've put both words in conceivable is academic word list, more difficult, less frequent. Possible is among the 1,000 most frequent words of the language. So is picture instead of illustration, and changed instead of altered. So if students are really paying attention, if you are teaching students to pay attention to the frequency of words and learn the most frequent words, you can use this vocab profile program to tweak a text, modify it a little bit to put in more frequent words as synonyms for some less frequent words the author might have originally chosen. Use it sparingly. Don't change everything to make it simple. They need some complexity for it to be real, for it to be meaningful, and for them to learn. But can make it a little simpler. Our bottom line is that familiar English is simpler English. You bring the students up to where they need to be, and you do a little bit of simplification along the way. If we focus on teaching the grammar and vocabulary that's really relevant for our student needs, we give them the tools they need, we let them learn, and that's what we're after. And that's concluded.
Okay, in conclusion, okay, I have my personal thing. His theory is perfect.
But
From my own experience, and I have told my student this. We have, for example, the student in college, they don't have much time, but that if you only pay attention to the first 1,000 words, which many times like up to 80% in science text, and also the academic word list, Actually, there was some guy already separate them. Out of those 570 words, 75 words, they break it down into field. If in science, they could be up to 9.9% in the text, but if you are in the art field, it could be up to 14%. So you could pay attention to those words. And I have proof for that. If you know the vocab, then your test score will be higher. When I was teaching at McFarland University, we have like I did analyze of a test score of between the midterm and the final of 22 classes in English for communications. The first half, I just ranked the whole, there are like 10 teachers teaching that, so it's at random. So I would just rank the mean class score of the whole 22 classes. Okay, so we got one set. And for the final, since the test, the difficulty level of the test of the final is 10% more difficult, which I mean that the mean score of the difficulty of the test for the midterm is 73%. Okay, so the average score of the student could get up to 73%, but for the final, the average score of the student could go up to like 63. So 10% difference in terms of difficulties means that the final exam is more like 10% higher. Okay, I have two classes that I taught. One classes, I told them to memorize the whole 100 words they have to know. And I guarantee them, I said, if you know all these 100 words, which is all they have to study, unfortunately, your test score would be improved. And I just drill that, I translate into Thai. 3 hours before the exam, I tutor them again. And most of them got those 100 words, about up to 90%. And the same 10 words they did not get, almost perfect, the same thing. So anyway, come to the final for the analysis again. That class was the only class that the mean score were lower by 5%. Other 21 classes, the mean score lower by 10%, according to the difficulty of the test.
A relative success.
Yes, so I said, you know, and all the students that were in that class, when after they took the test, they came out beaming. Oh, I got it, this is Marshall. All my, particularly the vocabulary part, I think I got everything. And not only that, when I analyzed further, their comprehension part is also higher. I have taught both classes, but the other class, they didn't listen to me. There was, oh, I know why, because they are law major. They told me, Mrs. Marshall, I have no time for your vocab because I didn't have the midterm. I have to pay attention to my law classes, and otherwise I will be kicked out. So, and it definitely shown that vocabulary is very important. I have many tests that I have done in 1 year at McFarland that make me believe that if they don't know the vocab, they don't know English.
Okay, we've kept you long enough. It's lunchtime. Email us. You're welcome to hang around with questions, but let's formally call this.